From Meat Eater's World News headquarters in Bozeman, Montana, this is Cal's Week in Review with Ryan Cal Callahan. Here's Cal.
Welcome to another episode of Cal's Week in Review, or Cal of the Wild, as we're calling all things these days. Good friend of mine, Ted Koch, with the North American Grouse Partnership. Ted and I have known each other for a long time. In fact, he's been on this podcast, but in a very reserved capacity, and he generously gave the big spotlight that he deserves to a bunch of ranchers that are part of the Lesser Prairie Chicken Landowner Alliance. Ted is a retired endangered species biologist. He is the current CEO of North American Grouse Partnership, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And we shot this out a little bit online the other week. North Dakota has officially announced that the greater sage grouse is, the headline said extinct, but it would be extirpated would be the more...
That's the better word, yeah. Extinct is like final everywhere. This is just gone from this part of the range.
Yeah, but the greater sage grouse is an amazing bird. I love it. I grew up hunting that bird. I hunt them every season. And they're just like another example of conservation isn't convenient because they need a specific habitat to proliferate, really. They can hang on, but they don't do well without old growth sagebrush, right?
Yep, and the lack of tall structures. Just healthy sagebrush habitat, that's all. It's simple. Healthy sagebrush habitat.
Yeah. So that's why Ted Koch is on, and we're going to talk about not only the greater sage grouse, but we'll probably get into some other gallinaceous species. And the only reason I know that word gallinaceous is from Ted. So
sorry.
If that's not reason for spotlight enough, I don't know what it is. How are sage grouse doing?
Well, so I'll start with this framing, Cal. Of the 9 prairie grouse populations present in North America historically, 6 of them are either extinct or recognized under the Endangered Species Act, and the other 3 are declining. So greater sage grouse are among the 3 are declining, along with sharp-tailed grouse and greater prairie chickens. The other 6, heath hens are extinct. That's the eastern prairie grouse that's been extinct for a century. Atwater's prairie chickens, Texas coast, are functionally extinct in the wild, trying to reintroduce. Then you got you have 2 populations of lesser prairie chickens. You have 2 smaller populations of sage grouse, and they're all either listed or candidates for listing under the Endangered Species Act. And so prairie grouse in general are in decline, have been declining. And perhaps your listeners already know that grasslands, on which all these prairie grouse, including sage grouse, depend, grasslands are the most threatened ecosystem on the continent and in the world. And it's the mission of the North American Grouse Partnership to try to highlight this fact and use these charismatic, gallinaceous birds, as you say. That's these, all of these chickens, turkeys, quail, they're gallinaceous birds, are the ground-oriented birds, to use the prairie grouse. And so that's greater prairie chickens, lesser prairie chickens, sharp-tailed grouse, sage grouse. Those are the 4 species groups of prairie grouse. The North American Grouse Partnership is trying to feature these prairie grouse species, highlight their plight, and issue our call for action to stop and reverse the losses of grasslands, the most threatened ecosystem. So greater sage grouse among that. They're just on that downward trend along with everything else.
Now, some of my listeners are going to know this already, but we just talked about greater sage grouse needing the sage brush. So why are you saying grasslands?
Yes, great question. So the sagebrush ecosystem is more precisely referred to as the sagebrush steppe ecosystem steppe. Now that's steppe spelled S-T-E-P-P-E. and steppe with the extra P and the extra E means grassland. So it's sagebrush grassland. And so then, sharp-tailed grouse, another prairie grouse, a lot of places where sharp-tailed grouse exists, they can actually coexist with some shrub component in there. With sage grouse, uniquely, they are sagebrush obligates. But rare is it that you will find a sagebrush, particularly in areas with sage grouse, that's taller than, say, 3 or 4 feet high. If you get structures 8 feet tall or taller, that begins to become a turnoff for prairie grouse. They do not do well around tall structures. They've evolved to avoid tall structures because tall structures are where raptors perch to hunt them. And so sage grouse kind of fall under that moniker of prairie grouse because it's sagebrush steppe, sagebrush grassland ecosystem, and the sagebrush isn't much taller than the grass around it. But yeah, sage grouse are really unique in the prairie grouse world in that they cannot exist without that low sage component in their grassland habitat.
So I guess why have we seen the not extirpation, but the extinction of these other grouse species?
Yeah, the other grouse populations, as we call them. It's biology is actually a lot messier than you think. What's a species? What's a subspecies? What's a population? And so a lot of times population is determined by how we manage them. Other times it's determined more by genetic or other biochemical differences. Other times it's determined by differences in habitat. But of the 9 populations, heath hens became extinct and to a significant degree because of overhunting. Settlers settled on the East Coast. Man, they were a convenient chicken to eat for dinner. And the last one was last seen. The last male was seen strutting by itself for the last 2 years of its life on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts, the last bastion of heath hens. And then you get Atwater's prairie chickens along the Texas Gulf Coast. And that's all the rest of the prairie grouse, Cal. It's habitat loss and fragmentation. And so Atwater's prairie chickens and all the lesser prairie chickens out of the southwestern Great Plains, recently listed under the Endangered Species Act, all habitat loss and fragmentation.
And do you want to just explain fragmentation? Yeah. I can explain some of this stuff, I promise, but my golden rule is once you get a biologist talking about their thing, it's best to just let them roll.
So fragmentation, a lot of us who love to hunt and fish know this when we think about, mule deer or pronghorn migrations, right? Just, a subdivision in the wrong spot or, a deer-proof fence in the wrong spot can massively disrupt, fragment habitat for those large mammals. Same exact thing for prairie grouse. You put a power line corridors through a swath of good-looking prairie grouse habitat, and those prairie grouse see that as an enormous obstacle to get past. You put a highway underneath that, it's gotten even worse. And then you till some of that rangeland and you convert it into farm ground using some of the ag subsidies that pay you to do it, even if you never get a crop off of it. And that's it. That fragments habitat. That habitat is fragmented, for a long time to come.
Fragmentation, right, can be anything from a new housing subdivision would be like a big example. But in the case of these prairie birds, where they are predisposed to avoid, we're talking hundreds of thousands of years of predator evasion, have taught them to avoid tall structures. It can be something as simple as people planting the wrong type of trees, or a power line corridor, which we can fix things like that a lot easier than we can some of the other forms of development.
Yeah.
And then on the habitat loss side of things, we're typically seeing agricultural changes, moving from grazing to row crop.
Yeah, that's right. And so ag and energy development are the two big ones across the range of the various prairie grouse species. The big one is, and I didn't even realize this until I started working with the ranchers, the Prairie Chicken Landowner Alliance. But what happens is the U.S. Department of Ag offers subsidies to landowners to break out their grasslands, turn them into tilled farmland, and they get paid the full value of that crop for that year, even if they never pull off a crop. And so if you're a rancher, you're faced with making, say, whatever, $100 an acre selling cows, or $150 an acre guaranteed payment from the federal government if you break out your ground and try to farm it, whether you ever pull off a crop or not. I mean, what would most of us do? Would you want to get paid $100 an acre to do more work, or $150 an acre to, we would pick the $150 an acre, whether it's more or less work depends on the circumstance. But
Well, sure. Yeah, I understand that part of it, but how do you reconcile the fact that the Endangered Species Act is also largely handled at the federal level? So isn't the ESA talking to the Department of Agriculture?
yeah, so that's a great question. So in the air, in the one place, I guess, no, two places where we have prairie grouse species listed in the Endangered Species Act, don't those prohibitions against take of endangered species prevent those programs from being implemented? And the short answer is yes, they would, if the fact set caused it to be so. But prairie grouse are notoriously difficult to find and monitor, and they move around to different places at different times of the year. And so, and all of this is private land, private rangeland. And so if a rancher says, you know what, I want to break out those 100 acres over here and get paid to farm it, it's pretty difficult to develop a fact set around there and have evidence, and then have the federal government have the temerity to try to prosecute that landowner to prevent them from converting to farmland. That's the reality, is that's just not happening right now, that kind of prohibition.
Yeah, and why would it ever need to get to prosecution?
Well, because there's lots of contradictory policies in the federal government that go on being implemented side by side forever. And so for the Department of Interior to persuade the Department of Agriculture to not offer those subsidies in certain areas because of prairie grouse seems untenable to me, because then those ranchers in those areas that want to break out their rangeland are going to say, what are you talking about? Well, why can't I do this? I'm not harming chickens when I do this. You can't prove that. Pay me to be a farmer instead of a rancher. So the conflicting policies, there's not a natural fit to have one policy talk to the other and have them work it out.
Which is wild. It seems like something you could work out.
Well,
So what's the hurdle here?
Yeah. So, and in fact, you can. And this is the leadership that Lesser Prairie Chicken Landowner Alliance wants to provide. So what they're saying, because some of our Lesser Prairie Chicken Landowner Alliance members, one of them in particular, he owns 10,000 acres. 5,000 of it is in farming. 5,000 of it is in ranching that's permanently conserved for lesser prairie chickens. The reason that 5,000 is permanently conserved is because when his neighbors and other business people approached him and said, hey, we can break out another 3,000 of your remaining 5,000 acres of grassland and turn that into farm ground, and you can double your money overnight. That rancher said, thanks, but no thanks. I want to stay a rancher. I know I could sell out. I know I could make more money, but I really want to keep this as ranch land. And part of the reason why is he is one of the most passionate archery deer and antelope hunters you will ever meet in your life. He gets it. He gets it, right? And he loves lesser prairie chickens, and he feels it's his responsibility to steward lesser prairie chickens. And he patiently sought out opportunities to sell a conservation easement on his land to a conservation buyer to permanently protect the 5,000 acres for chickens. But it shouldn't have to be that hard. It shouldn't take an exceptional rancher like that who loves hunting and loves lesser prairie chickens to spend 15 years of his life trying to save ranching and chickens on his land. We need to make it easier than that. And so what the Lesser Prairie Chicken Landowner Alliance proposes is to do just that, to adjust agricultural policy to not only make it easier to break down to become a farmer, but to make it easier to stay a rancher, to get paid to be a rancher, and provide the whole wealth of ecosystem services that come along with healthy rangelands.
And that is there's no balance, right? It's like you can get paid $150 to farm it, or you can get paid less to keep it in grazing.
Yeah. And so ranching, say, pays $100, and I'm throwing these numbers out, but say ranching pays $100 an acre to sell your cows, $150 an acre guaranteed if you break it out and try to farm, even if you're not successful. Our proposal is to say, look at all the ecosystem services that come along with these healthy rangelands: clean water, clean air, more water, healthy soils, healthy vegetation, healthy wildlife populations, carbon storage, and the massive roots of these grassland ecosystems. These are all values that Americans want to keep and they want to pay for. In fact, we appropriate billions of dollars a year for the express purpose of paying for these values. Yet it's not going on the ground sufficiently in the right places to stop and reverse the loss of grasslands. And so the Lesser Prairie Chicken Landowner Alliance has very specifically identified 42 counties and the methods by which the public is invited to pay them for these ecosystem services to make up the difference between $100 an acre and $150 an acre. Then at least a rancher could say, do I want to get paid $150 an acre to break out into farm ground, or do I want to get paid $150 an acre to grow cows and provide ecosystem services together combined, which will get me $150 an acre? That's the magic that we're pursuing, giving the public the opportunity to pay that extra $50 an acre to keep it in rangeland and keep lesser prairie chickens and keep mule deer and keep pronghorn.
Keep pollinators, keep drought tolerance.
Yes. Keep
fire
quail.
Resistance, all that good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of a tangent, but over here in the Shields Valley, just north of Livingston, Montana, new golf course going in, or it's already in. And all sorts of lawsuits around it because they're watering it illegally. So they got to keep the sod and the greens watered. And it is basically the furthest western huntable population of greater sage grouse in the state. And as far as I know, they're not a golf course bird.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it really ticks me off. Like I said, it's tangent. We don't need to dwell on that. Maybe I just need to go over there and cut those flags on the green down a little shorter.
But it's another great example. Here's where it's not a tangent, Cal. Lesser prairie chickens became listed under the Endangered Species Act on our watch, on Hunter's watch. 11 years ago, you could hunt lesser prairie chickens. Today, they're listed under the Endangered Species Act. And, we're going to be talking about sage grouse in North Dakota. And I was just talking to Jesse Kolar, who North Dakota Game and Fish supervises the program that did the counts that failed to detect any males on the lek this spring. Jesse made the comment to me just before I got on this program, Cal, that what really, he's seen this coming for a long time. He's not that surprised. What really concerns him is that 30 to 50 years from now, sharp-tailed grouse will be following sage grouse in North Dakota if current trends continue. That should scare the crap out of every one of your listeners. And it's because of the things that you just talked about there, north of Livingston. And us hunters are letting these things happen day after day, year after year, because there's no one alarm. It's the boiling the frog thing, right? Where if you put a frog in a pot of water, turn on the heat, it'll die. If you throw it in a pot of hot water, it'll immediately jump out. Well, the frog's been sitting in cool water, and that water's getting pretty warm now when it comes to grasslands and prairie grouse. And so that story that you tell is yet another example of where we as hunters, and we as Americans, not just us hunters, but where at some point we have to find the opportunity to wake up and stand up and say, no, we need to save these places.
And I know people don't like to think of it in terms of a resource, right? But if you do, you have a really unbelievable public resource in these huntable species. And in order to have huntable species, as we just talked about, there's all these ecosystem benefits that come along with making sure those huntable species are there.
That's right.
And you balance that with the fact that there's a couple of landowners that are going to make a ton of money with a golf course for a very, very exclusive experience for a handful of people in comparison to the folks that could be out walking around and spending gas money and food money in small towns, pursuing gallinaceous birds. So in which, like, I don't have an answer to, right? Other than talking about this stuff that I know and feel so strongly is such an amazing thing, resource, whatever you want to call it. Having those experiences in my life have certainly benefited me, I feel. But when we talk about North Dakota and this recent article that came out in the Green Wire, proclaiming that the sage grouse is extinct from North Dakota, part of its native range. What happened specifically in North Dakota?
Habitat loss and fragmentation. Same
In the
old,
form
same
of
old.
anything
Yeah. So the two biggest drivers, I was talking with Jesse Kohler again, North Dakota Game and Fish, ag and energy development, which is the same thing in the southwestern Great Plains, everywhere else. And specifically, he talked about breaking out farm ground using farm bill subsidies. He also talked about ranchers developing or improving rangelands by chaining or burning sagebrush, so there's more grass for the cows to eat. And then energy development, they've got a lot of oil and gas there in North Dakota, a lot of energy transmission going on as well. I'm sure they've got renewables.
Right, so more vertical structures, but also a lot more traffic out there servicing.
That's right.
Wells and
right.
pumps and
highways,
and turbines and
fence lines, even fence lines. All those things are wear and tear on grassland loving species, and it's not just sage grouse. I mentioned, Western Kansas mule deer are really in sharp decline. We already have a listed population of pronghorn in the U.S. and Arizona, listed under the Endangered Species Act. How long is it going to be before we list pronghorn somewhere, say, in the southwestern Great Plains or in the northern Great Plains or wherever else some scientist finds a genetically distinct population? They're all in decline, right?
Yep.
As grasslands go, so go pronghorn, so go mule deer, so go prairie grouse.
California's got a endangered population of pronghorn as well.
That, I think you might be right, yeah. And so, here again, Jesse Kohler's words to me in North Dakota just a little while ago, sage grouse he's disappointed about. Sharp-tailed grouse 30 to 50 years from now, he's scared for.
Yeah,
and we should all be scared. We should all be scared.
We should. And, sage grouse, to me, are an incredible, very special bird. I think there's probably a greater population of birders that are in love with the sage grouse than hunters that are in love with the sage grouse, because folks who grew up in sage grouse country were told while in the womb that you couldn't eat a sage grouse. But
which is not true, but go ahead.
Greater sage grouse thighs are about the best eaten gallinaceous bird meat there is, in my opinion. They're fantastic and huge. They're also, an incredible bird for getting somebody their first double.
Yeah.
If you're shooting an over and under or side by side, because they just don't move fast.
That's right. You got time.
Yeah. But it's one of those things where the light clicks on in somebody's head where they're like, oh my gosh, this is actually possible. I can flush a bird. I can identify it. I can get the safety off. I can shoot it. And then I can look for the next bird and get it too.
Yeah.
And then that really does apply to all the faster birds and more challenging birds.
Yeah, that's right.
And, I'm sure a lot of people are like, why the hell are you talking about hunting birds that you've already talked about as extirpated from states and endangered? And, the reason is because somehow, some way, we need to, I'd like you to provide the biological reason, but the social reason I'm providing is somehow, some way, we need people to be invested in this bird. And the more invested they are, the more easily we can activate them to stand up for these big charismatic birds. And then to jump over to the sharp-tailed grouse. The reason I brought up how few people relatively hunting appreciate the greater sage grouse, well, there's probably, I don't know, 100 times the amount of people who spend big money and travel thousands of miles to hunt sharp-tails with their fancy pointing dogs.
Absolutely. And
And
another terrific upland bird.
it is a
by the way.
fantastic upland bird, yeah.
They're not a lot faster than sage grouse. I'll tell you that. They're faster, but not a lot.
Yeah, it's just a smaller target, yeah. And those people need to stand up right now too, because by and large, it's the same habitat. Yeah, you can hunt the brushy stuff, as you mentioned, for sharp tails, but they're not going to stick around if all there is plowed fields and hedgerows. They need that grassland steppe.
Yeah, that's right.
So what's the biological answer to hunting these populations?
Yeah, so hunting is not a threat to most species managed for hunting today. One of the most famous examples is the trajectory of snow goose populations in North America over the last 20, 30 years. I mean, they fluctuated wildly from low to extremely high, back down to kind of low again. And hunting has 0% influence on those massive fluctuations. And the same thing is said for prairie grouse populations, very different circumstance from waterfowl. But the reason we continue to lose prairie grouse populations is habitat loss and fragmentation. That has nothing to do with hunting. In fact, the more people we can get to hunt and be interested in hunting, the more people we have to advocate to keep those remaining habitats. Now here's the thing that's really tricky for most prairie grouse. Sage grouse are a little bit of an exception, but I'll use lesser prairie chickens as the example. Over 90% of remaining lesser prairie chicken habitat is on private rangelands. It's on private ground, managed for grazing. And here's the kicker. Ranching pays less than any other form of land use. That's why grasslands are the most threatened ecosystem on the continent of the world and why lesser prairie chickens are listed under the ESA. Because somebody can knock on their door and say, farmland, solar, wind, oil and gas, transmission, subdivision, blah, blah, blah. Right? And so hunting just doesn't hold a candle to the massive negative impacts of all those different competing forms of development. And in fact, hunters must be a part of the solution. And if we hunters are not a part of the solution, we will not save prairie grouse. I feel that it's that clear. It's that strong. It's that direct. If we don't stand up for what we love, who will?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, and it's just anytime, I'll be driving back over to South Dakota this late fall, early winter is what's on the books right now. And I guarantee you I'll see folks installing drain tile and
that's right.
And, things that we just cannot get back, those intermittent wetlands that all of a sudden disappear
that are essential for brood rearing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that they need that water. They need those wet edges. They need a whole bunch of little wet edges. And that's exactly what farmers tile first. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So what does the rank and file American have to say about something as big as the Farm Bill, especially what you're talking about, which is trying to get another program or I know, we've talked about the North American Grasslands Conservation Act, something that big into existence.
Yeah. So this is where Ted's weird thinking gets featured. So we have lots of incredible conservation groups out there, Pheasants Forever, National Wildlife Federation, who are leading the charge on Farm Bill policies and policy changes that have been and are really important. We've got National Wildlife Federation really providing excellent leadership on North American Grasslands Conservation Act. And by the way, North American Grouse Partnership supports all these things. But the tact that we have taken, given the fact that we've recently admitted lesser prairie chickens to the emergency room of conservation by listing them under the Endangered Species Act, is we said, you know what? Let's go ask the people who actually own the land if they care. And if they say they care, let's ask them what they need. And now we have the Lesser Prairie Chicken Landowner Alliance, which is a bunch of very caring, visionary, passionate landowners who love wildlife and who love lesser prairie chickens, and some of them even love to hunt, as I said. And so we asked them, and you know what the first thing they said to me, the LPCLA started a little over 3 years ago, Cal. First call they said, you know what, Ted? Nobody's ever asked us before what we want. And they said, here's what we don't want. We don't want subsidies. We don't want cost share. We don't want incentives. And that's all what the Farm Bill is all about. And these are people that know, because not only are some of them ranchers, some of them are also farmers, that participate in those subsidy programs. But it's not the way they want to make a living. They don't want a subsidy. They know they've got values on their land that all Americans want and want to pay for, including these valuable ecosystem services, clean air, clean water, healthy soils, wildlife. They would love to save an endangered species. They just can't afford to pay for it out of their own pocket. And they simply want to offer the American public the opportunity to pay for that alongside of growing beef and feeding Americans, which is the real reason they're on that land in the first place. And so that's the difference in this tact. It's not the North American Grouse Partnership going to Congress or the Trump administration and saying, hey, let's do this, let's do that. We're supporting these landowners gathering their own voice and doing it. And here's the real parallel to hunters and anglers. You'll get a kick out of this, your listeners will. Ranchers became ranchers because they'd rather be out on the land amongst animals and not around people. How about us hunters and anglers, right? I mean, we like to hunt and fish because we like to go out in the woods by ourselves instead of being around people. Same principle, right? Well, to try to get these landowners, these ranchers to say, hey, put on your best cowboy hat and pair of jeans and let's fly to Washington, D.C. and talk to some people, that is anathema to these individuals. And it is a long, slow process. Now, they want to do it. They want to be empowered to do it. The North American Grouse Partnership and this retired endangered species biologist you're talking to right now, Cal, is trying to figure out how to do with it. And we're getting terrific support from wonderful humans like Marilyn Vetter with Pheasants Forever and folks with National Wildlife Federation, Nature Conservancy. But we're right in the middle of this journey right now, empowering these people who actually own the land and participate in the programs to say what they need to save grasslands and prairie grouse. And it's to get paid fair market value for the ecosystem services that they've been giving away for generations on their lands.
All the meetings I had on the Hill in DC a few months ago, I would just say, hey, I got a real easy one for you. I'm like, you ever heard of the Lesser Prairie Chicken Landowner Alliance? You ever heard of grazing land? I'm like, here's a bunch of conservative folks, by and large, that really need some help. Give them a reason to stay in business, you know? And it's one of those things that helping on the private side of the fence is the biggest part of the solution puzzle that we have with a lot of these species in a lot of these states.
That's right. And you know, recent appropriations bill included increased funding for VPA, HIP, right? That's voluntary public access, habitat improvement, for states to pay for more access to these private lands for hunters and anglers. Yep. And let's pair that up with long-term permanent conservation that keeps ranchers ranching while continuing to grow an endangered species and mule deer and quail and everything else. I mean, this isn't that hard. And it's not even that expensive. And we don't even need a new pile of money to do it. We just need to take the dollars we're already putting towards these programs and spend them in a more strategic and focused area. So the losers might be, say, people closer to Kansas City who really don't have much left on their property in terms of wildlife. And the winners are these people on remote ranches in the western part of Kansas, for example, who can sustain these last best places in our grassland ecosystems.
Yeah, and I know on the state level, you know, Kansas was working on some language that would, make sure that those public access to private land dollars were spent in a more strategic way by, making sure there's good habitat on
Yes.
the properties before providing those access dollars to a property there where occasionally an animal might pass through.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think, probably a base level solution here is people just need to pay attention and be involved, right?
That's right. That's right. And the bottom line is, again, if 90% of the land is privately owned, let's ask these people, do you care? And if so, how can we help you help us? That's the strategy the North American Grouse Partnership is taking. And that's what it's, when you say pay attention, Cal, that's the thing. I don't know. It just hasn't been part of the conservation community's thinking to stand behind the private landowner to conserve. I think when hunters and anglers think of private land, they think of owning a parcel so they can hunt or fish on it. They don't think of supporting some private landowner out there to provide the habitat to support the species that they love. And I get it. I mean, it's a bit of a new paradigm, but it's also immediately logical, I think, and foreseeable that this is, if we're going to save the most threatened ecosystem on the continent and in the world, that's what it's going to take. Either that or we buy it all up, and I don't see that happening anytime soon.
No, and there's so many competing interests on both private and public ground, but like the location of wind farms and solar and to me, speaking clearly and frankly, some of this is the result of people just not wanting to do the hard work.
That's right.
It's all that land, the same old thing of like, well, all that public land's not doing anything.
Yeah.
Why don't we just stick it out there?
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. No, and we fortunately we do have public land parcels in here. Those can become part of the equation. But yeah, it's if we're going to save the most threatened ecosystem on the continent, it requires a new paradigm. It requires partnering with the people who own it and who want to save it as well. Finding those people who want to save it alongside the rest of us, people who care, and then agreeing on how we can become partners to do so. That's all.
Yeah, and you're not talking about the big scary government overreach scenario.
Right. This is all voluntary
describe.
participation. That's right. We're not going to. Nobody's going to make any landowner do anything they don't want to do. But that's why it's really important to find those landowners who really care and who want the same outcomes as we conservationists want. I mean, that's really where the magic begins, finding those landowners that care just like us.
And folks who are listening, you got to be reminded, right? There's, in my mind, somewhere around, we'll call it upper 500 million acres of huntable, federally managed public land in the U.S. We always say 640 million, but to be a little more objective, stuff that you can actually hunt, it's lower. Yeah. And land set aside specifically for agriculture in the United States are just under 2 billion acres.
Wow,
so
I didn't know that.
And don't ever let this be separated into an either or type of conversation. We got to get past that. We got to grow up and be adults and understand that if we really want it, nothing's got to be an either or. But one side of the fence is going to facilitate the other side of the fence and vice versa. But we got to fight to make it happen.
So, Cal, that's a great number. I'm going to highlight that. 500 million huntable public land acres, 2 billion acres dedicated to ag.
Yeah, a little over. Yeah.
Okay. And so why wouldn't we then turn to these lands that already harbor so many of the species that we love to hunt for and fish for and work with the people who own the land to figure out how to conserve it long term and provide access?
All right. Sorry, Ted. Let's I just found my notes here again. Okay. This is where I was going with this. 340 million people in the United States. Let's say there's 590 million huntable acres under federal management, right? So that is by default open to 340 million people in the United States, right? So, that's roughly a person every, let's say, like 1 acre and change.
Yeah.
And then their agriculture specifically privately held 1.19 billion acres.
Okay.
Right. So basically double
Yeah, double.
what the public estate is.
So yeah,
Right.
so if we've got double, the amount of private land, and it harbors all these species that we love to pursue and that we value in other ways, then why wouldn't we find new and important ways to partner with those who actually own the lands and the habitats about how to sustain that?
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's threats to all of the above, obviously.
That's right. And I tell you, it's a funny thing. We were a couple of ranchers in North Texas or on the Les Prairie Chicken Landowner lands. If you met them off the street, you'd think they were the crustiest, most anti-government, hardcore North Texas ranchers you could ever see walk off the pages of a book. They are a couple of the most hardcore environmentalists when it comes to trying to keep, wind energy from taking the last lesser prairie chickens in their county. They are desperate for help to save lesser prairie chickens. And it's not just about the chickens. It's about their ranching and about all the other wildlife. And it's about the chickens too. Their hearts are as green as some of the greenest environmentalists you ever met. It's beautiful. It makes you want to cry. And if we can't find ways to identify these awesome humans that have the special privilege of owning these lands and support them, we're not doing right by our children's children. We're not doing all we can do to make sure our children's children have access to these resources. We've got to forge these new pathways and these new partnerships.
And it's low hanging fruit, right? Like these people are voluntarily wanting to do it.
Yes.
So if we can't help them, we're basically giving up.
Exactly. I mean, our interests are so aligned. It's hilarious.
Yeah. So where
you wouldn't know that at first.
Where are we on the North American Grasslands Conservation Act?
A little bit stalled out. Congress is headed to recess here in a couple of weeks. But we've made a lot of good progress. I think we've gotten a couple of co-sponsors on either side of the aisle. And Cal, let's see. I'm trying to think of the last call I participated in on that. So I would say, in the bigger picture sense, we continue to make steady progress, and we're getting closer and closer to the kind of support you'd eventually want to see for a bill like this. And this is going to be one of those kinds of bills that's obviously going to be many years in the making, as it's already been a couple of years. But the champions of it, National Wildlife Federation, Pheasants Forever, and others, can continue to take steps every day. And then partner groups like the North American Grouse Partnership, we occasionally weigh in where we can to try to continue to build support for that. So still a ways away, but we're closer than we've been before.
And the nuts and bolts of that one is a huge part of what we're talking about, right? It's finding that way to facilitate the stewardship of these grasslands through kind of a sister model to the North American Wetlands Conservation Act, which is basically the only thing out there aside from a few state programs that are helping people make the right decision when it comes to draining that intermittent wetland or keeping it producing as is.
That's right. And they do it by buying conservation, by paying money. Again, these are private lands. These people are trying to figure out how they can best make money off these lands. If one of the ways they can make money is by selling conservation, a lot of people want to do that. A lot of people really care. And you said it right, Cal. I mean, this is North American Grasslands Act modeled after North American Wetlands Conservation Act. And then some people ask, well, you got all these Farm Bill programs under USDA, and then you got the Wetlands Act and soon to be Grasslands Act under the Department of the Interior. Why two different departments? Why can't they all just be one? And here's the answer. Under Farm Bill programs under U.S. Department of Agriculture, those programs are designed to help producers while helping conservation. But under the Department of the Interior, with the North American Wetlands Act and the Grasslands Act, those programs are designed to help conservation while helping the producer, right? Different priority. One starts with the producer, tries to affect conservation. The other one starts with conservation, reaches out to the producer. And that commingling of priorities across the landscape has really done well for conserving wetlands on the northern plains. And we'd like to see that for grasslands everywhere.
And Ted, do you have any resources you could point people to for seeing some of these birds, like when it's dancing season, when they're out on the leks, and folks just want to see how charismatic these critters are? Do you have any resources you could point them to there?
Yeah, so on the grousepartners.org website, we have some resources. The individual state wildlife management agencies, I think, will have resources as well. For lesser prairie chickens, there's actually a guy who does a commercial operation, and I can't say the name of his operation right now, but I think if you looked up lesser prairie chicken viewing, you'd pretty quickly find an opportunity to do that. And it's on one of our lesser prairie chicken landowner alliance's ranches where he's got blinds built on a couple of leks. It's really a great operation. They do a great job. And then I'm not sure if there are other birding tours. For example, I'm thinking sage grouse, Cal, and I'm not sure if you know, but so you can start with our website. You can go to the state agency websites, and then you can do a search online for things specifically like lesser prairie chickens, and you'll find specific opportunities there.
Yeah, I think American Prairie here in Montana has some pretty fantastic opportunities.
That would be a great resource. Good catch. Yeah.
Yeah, for the greater sage grouse. And then sharptails do a great little dance too. They're pretty darn fun.
Boy, and for anybody listening, if you have not seen a prairie grouse dance or boom, and it's kind of different. I mean, sharptails really do this hilarious little foot stomp and dance, whereas male sage grouse are knocking you over with a cannon. Yes, but both of them are the displays of the males. And it is really, to see a bunch of males on a lek and to watch those females casually stroll through like they're walking down the middle of a bar, checking out all the guys, deciding who they're going to let talk to them. It's a moving experience. It's awesome.
Absolutely. And then that'd be a great step if you really want to understand, hopefully, some of the passion that you heard today around these super cool birds. And then if you want to get involved and help out, which I'll certainly be calling on you to do, whether you like it or not, how do folks figure out that step, Ted? Where's their best points of contact?
Yeah, so look up North American Grasslands Conservation Act, figure out how to get involved supporting that. And then grousepartners.org. Please become a member of the North American Grouse Partnership. We think that we're building the model that is going to save the day for grasslands by empowering ranchers to say what they need to get paid fair market value for ecosystem services while continuing to raise beef for all Americans and saving an endangered species. And once we get that model built in the southwestern Great Plains, we're going to export it elsewhere so that Jesse Kolar in North Dakota no longer has to worry about losing sharp-tailed grouse in North Dakota in 30 to 50 years.
Through North American Grouse Partnership, Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever.
Pheasants Forever, by the way, is another. They are the leader in so many ways in upland bird conservation. So Pheasants
Absolutely.
Forever.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cal.
And TRCP, BHA, we all will absolutely be pointing people towards the Grasslands, North American Grasslands Conservation Act. But if you feel like doing some reading up on your own and lobbying on your own, you're absolutely welcome to do so. All it takes is a phone call or an email. Tell people that this is something that you want to see make happen for all your own reasons and maybe some of the reasons that you heard here today. And like Ted said, become a member, North American Grasslands, the
North American Grouse Partnership.
North American Grouse Partnership. I think I still owe you guys some money. I know I do. I got to get that check.
That's right.
To you,
That's
Ted.
right.
And
in terms of taking action, I think ask your congressperson or senator, hey, I understand grasslands are the most threatened ecosystem on the continent and in the world. What are you doing to help save them? Even just a simple email like that, it's not actionable now, but what that's going to do, it's going to set you up so that when I'm back on your podcast here in a few months and the landowners are making their big push, Cal, that your members can listen to this and reach out specifically and directly to support the request for partnership coming from the landowners themselves.
That's great advice. You know, Ted, I'd want to wrap this up because I want to keep it short, but we're ignoring one very obvious question that we have to hit here is, can we put sage grouse back? Are they gone from North Dakota for good?
So sage grouse could make their way back to North Dakota if the habitat was sufficient to support them and it was connected to already occupied habitat. But I'll tell you, Cal, restoring gallinaceous birds through reintroduction is, how do I want to say it? I don't want to say it's impossible. I don't want to say it's never been done. It's extremely difficult. And the reason is all these birds, you get, a dozen to 20 birds on a lek, and you need multiple leks, and you need multiple females attending all these leks. And then they all have to have sex, and the female have to go lay their eggs and raise their young. And if you bring a bunch of birds into a new habitat and dump them out on the ground, it's extremely hard to create a metapopulation out of thin air like that and expect them to be successful, to expect them to know where to go to lek, where to go to nest, where to go to feed their young brood, in wet meadows along wetlands. So the best that we can hope for is to save habitats that are connected to already occupied habitats and have them play bumper pool as they recolonize. And but the fact is that the habitat in North Dakota for sage grouse is so degraded that it would take a lot of work to turn that habitat around and grow a bunch of new sagebrush habitat before you could then hope to bring sage grouse back.
Yeah, because how easy is it to grow a sagebrush?
Yeah. And I don't know if it's that hard, but it takes decades.
Right. So the time is not convenient.
Yeah, that's the hard part. Yeah. And then keeping that land set aside for sagebrush for decades so that you can wait a couple decades after that for the grouse to get the memo and to show up. So it's a tough state of affairs. It's not like putting a group of bighorn sheep back on a mountain range. It is not like that at all.
Yeah.
Not that that's easy, but
but there's imprinted learned behavior
specific to that habitat. Yeah.
Yeah, specific to that habitat. And a lot of birds are going to die trying to figure out where to go.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, it's tough. Habitat, gang.
That's right.
Ted, so awesome to have you on. If folks have questions for Ted, please let me know. ASKCAL, that's askcal@themeateater.com. We'll have Ted back on to answer them, or I'll get you pointed in the right direction, or we'll answer them right here on this show. That's all I got for you this week. Thank you so much for listening. And Ted, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Cal. Thank you for your passion for grasslands too. I don't know if people know that, but Cal, you've been a real champion and you continue to be, and I know you'll do more in the future. Thank you for everything.
Well, yeah, buddy. As you know, I'm happy to be out here doing my part, but all it is my part. Doesn't matter how big the platform or how loud you yell. It's never going to be one person getting this stuff done. So
that's right.
Thanks again, everybody. I'll talk to you next week.